The sun painted the horizon in hues of gold and crimson as Belle Emerson clutched her valise tighter, dust swirling around her ankles from the stagecoach that had just departed. Silverton, Colorado, 1882, nothing more than a collection of wooden structures, muddy streets, and the promise of silver in the surrounding mountains. A promise that had brought her father west and ultimately claimed his life. Belle took a deep breath, the mountain air crisp in her lungs despite the warmth of the late June day. The telegram had been brief. Father passed, mine claim in jeopardy, come immediately. She'd left Philadelphia within the day, traveling westward with little more than a change of clothes, her father's pocket watch, and the deed to what she hoped was still their silver mine. The main street of Silverton teemed with activity miners trudging to and from the hills, merchants hawking wares, women scurrying about with baskets of goods. Belle felt conspicuously out of place in her tailored traveling suit, the hem already dusted with dirt from the journey. "Miss, you look a bit lost," a gruff voice called. Belle turned to see an elderly man with a snow-white beard leaning against the post office wall. "I'm looking for the law office of Mr. Hargrove," she replied. "I've been told he handled my father's affairs." "Hargrove," the old man chuckled. "2 buildings down, past the assayer's office. Mind your step, though rain last night made the street treacherous." Belle nodded her thanks and proceeded carefully. Her father had written of the primitive conditions, but experiencing them firsthand was another matter entirely. 3 years in this place had killed him a cave-in at his mine, according to the telegram. Now she was here to settle his affairs, sell whatever was left, and return to civilization. The law office of Wilbur Hargrove was a cramped space smelling of tobacco and musty paper. The man himself, round and balding, peered at Belle over wire-rimmed spectacles. "Miss Emerson, I presume," he said, rising from his desk. "My condolences on your loss." "Thank you, Mr. Hargrove. I'd like to discuss my father's mine and arrange for its sale as quickly as possible." Hargrove's expression tightened. "There are complications, I'm afraid. Your father's claim the Bluebonnet mine is being challenged by the Silverton Mining Company. They claim he failed to properly establish boundaries." Belle felt her chest constrict. "That's preposterous." "My father was meticulous with his paperwork." "Indeed, but powerful interests are at work. The mine has shown promising yields recently." Hargrove shuffled papers nervously. "There's to be a hearing before Judge Winters tomorrow morning." "I've been preparing your father's defense, but with him gone, I'll be there," Belle interrupted. "The Bluebonnet was my father's life. I won't let it be stolen." Hargrove looked doubtful. "Miss Emerson, mining disputes here aren't like legal proceedings back east. They can become volatile. Nevertheless, I intend to fight for what's rightfully mine." After departing the law office with a stack of documents, Belle sought accommodations. The Grand Imperial Hotel stood as the town's sole respectable lodging, a 3-story brick building amid the wooden structures lining the main street. The hotel clerk, a thin man with a waxed mustache, regarded her skeptically. "Single lady traveling alone. We don't usually—" "I am Belle Emerson, daughter of Harold Emerson of the Bluebonnet mine," she interrupted, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "I require a room for at least a week." At the mention of her father's mine, the clerk's demeanor shifted. "Of course, Miss Emerson, my condolences on your father's passing." He slid a key across the counter. "2nd floor, room 5, dining room serves supper until 8. Belle thanked him and climbed the stairs to her room, a simple space with a narrow bed, washstand, and small writing desk. Through the window, she could see the mountains that had beckoned her father west and the silhouettes of mine headframes dotting the landscape. She unpacked her few belongings and washed the travel dust from her face. The mirror reflected a young woman of 22, her auburn hair coming loose from its pins, green eyes shadowed with fatigue. She looked nothing like the mining heiress she needed to become by morning. After changing into a fresh blouse, Belle ventured downstairs for supper. The dining room was filled predominantly with men miners, businessmen, and the occasional cowboy passing through. Conversation quieted momentarily as she entered, then resumed with increased volume. Belle kept her head high as she was shown to a small table in the corner. She had just received her meal of beef stew when a shadow fell across her table. Looking up, she found herself staring at a tall man with sharp features and cold eyes. "Miss Emerson," he said, his tone falsely pleasant. "Victor Caldwell, president of the Silverton Mining Company. I heard you'd arrived." "News travels quickly, Mr. Caldwell," Belle replied, keeping her voice level. "It's a small town." He smiled without warmth. "I wanted to express my condolences personally. Your father was dedicated." "Thank you. Now if you'll excuse me, I'd like to eat my meal while it's warm." Caldwell's smile remained fixed. "Of course. I merely wanted to suggest that perhaps we could settle this unfortunate business privately. The Blue Bonnet claim is contested territory, but I'm prepared to offer you a fair sum far more convenient than protracted legal battles." Belle met his gaze steadily. "I'll see you at the hearing, Mr. Caldwell." His expression hardened. "As you wish. But I should warn you, frontier justice isn't always just." With a slight bow, he departed. Belle's appetite had diminished, but she forced herself to eat. She needed strength for the battle ahead. As she finished her meal, she couldn't help noticing a man watching her from across the room, tall and broad-shouldered, with tawny hair and a weathered face that suggested long days under the sun. Unlike Caldwell's calculating stare, this man's gaze seemed curious, perhaps even concerned. When she met his eyes, he quickly looked away. Morning brought no reprieve from Belle's anxieties. She dressed with care in her most severe navy traveling suit, pinned her hair tightly, and tucked her father's documents into a leather portfolio. The courthouse, such as it was, occupied the second floor above the mercantile. By the time Belle arrived, the room was already crowded with spectators. This was apparently the most interesting entertainment Silverton had to offer. Judge Winters, a stern-faced man with mutton chop whiskers, called the proceedings to order. Wilbur Hargrove looked positively ill as he took his place beside Belle. "This hearing concerns the disputed claim of the Blue Bonnet mine," the judge announced. "Silverton Mining Company claims prior rights to the Eastern Tunnel, where significant silver deposits have been located." Victor Caldwell's attorney, a slick man named Pearson, presented their case. First, a technical argument about survey stakes and boundary lines that Belle struggled to follow despite having studied her father's papers. When Hargrove rose to respond, his rebuttal seemed weak and disorganized. During a brief recess, Belle confronted him. "Mr. Hargrove, you're hardly presenting our case at all." The lawyer mopped his brow. "Miss Emerson, I should tell you Caldwell owns half this town, including the mortgage on my office. I can't. You're deliberately undermining my father's claim." Belle felt her cheeks flush with anger. "I'm trying to survive," Hargrove whispered. "Nobody wins against Caldwell." When the hearing resumed, Belle rose to her feet. "Your Honor, I wish to speak on my own behalf." Judge Winters frowned. "This is highly irregular, Miss Emerson." "As is having counsel who won't properly represent his client," she replied steadily. "I request permission to present my father's documentation myself." A murmur ran through the crowded room. The judge hesitated, then nodded curtly. "Proceed." For the next hour, Belle methodically dismantled Caldwell's claims using her father's survey maps, assay reports, and claim registrations. She had spent half the night studying the documents, and her presentation was clear and compelling. When she finished, even Judge Winters looked impressed. "The court will consider the evidence presented and render a decision tomorrow morning," he announced, banging his gavel. As the room emptied, Belle gathered her papers, aware of Victor Caldwell's furious glare from across the room. Outside, she paused on the boardwalk, suddenly overwhelmed by what she'd done. She had no allies here, no one to. "That was quite a performance, Miss Emerson." She turned to find the man who had been watching her in the hotel dining room the previous evening. Up close, she could see his eyes were a startling blue against his sun-bronzed skin. "Thank you, Mr. Tanner Royce," he replied, touching the brim of his hat. "I worked your father's claim for a spell last year. You knew my father." Belle felt a surge of hope. "Yes, madam." "Honest man, hard worker. That's why I came to the hearing. Knew Caldwell would try something underhanded." He glanced around before continuing in a lower voice. You made a powerful enemy today. Caldwell doesn't take kindly to being challenged, especially by a woman. I'm not afraid of Victor Caldwell, Belle declared, though her pulse quickened. Tanner's expression remained serious. Maybe you should be. Things happen in mining towns, accidents, fires. Might be wise to have someone watching your back until this is settled. Before Belle could respond, Hargrove hurried past, avoiding her gaze. My former attorney appears to have abandoned me entirely, she observed bitterly. Can't say I'm surprised. Hargrove owes money all over town. Tanner hesitated. Look, I'm heading up to the Blue Bonnet this afternoon to check on things. Your father hired me as foreman before the accident. Would you like to see it? Belle considered the offer. She needed to see the mine that had been her father's obsession, and Tanner Royce seemed to be the only person in Silverton not intimidated by Caldwell. I would, Mr. Royce. Thank you. They arranged to meet in an hour, giving Belle time to change into more practical attire. She replaced her formal suit with a simpler skirt and blouse and sturdy boots she'd had the foresight to pack. Tanner was waiting with 2 horses when she emerged from the hotel. Hope you can ride, Miss Emerson. The Blue Bonnet's a fair piece up the mountain. My father insisted I learn, Belle replied, accepting his help onto the mare he'd procured for her. They rode out of town, following a narrow trail that wound steadily upward through pine forests and rocky outcroppings. Tanner pointed out other mines along the way, describing their yields and histories. Despite her preoccupation with the hearing, Belle found herself admiring the wild beauty of the landscape. There she is, Tanner said eventually, gesturing toward a wooden structure perched on the mountainside. The Blue Bonnet. The mine wasn't what Belle had expected. Rather than a simple hole in the ground, it was a complex of buildings, a headframe over the mine shaft, an ore house, and a small cabin. As they approached, a stocky man with a graying beard emerged from the cabin. Who's there? He called, hand moving toward his belt. It's Royce, Mitch, Tanner replied, and Harold Emerson's daughter. The man Mitch relaxed slightly. Miss Emerson heard you was in town. I'm Mitchell Cooper, your father's partner these last 2 years. Belle dismounted, surprised. Partner. My father never mentioned a partner in his letters. More of a handshake arrangement, Mitch explained. I supplied equipment, labor when needed. Harold gave me a quarter share of whatever came out. His expression darkened. Been keeping watch since the accident. Caldwell's men have been sniffing around. Inside the cabin, Belle found evidence of her father's life, geological books, maps pinned to walls, a half-written letter on the desk addressed to her. Emotion threatened to overwhelm her, but she pushed it aside, focusing instead on understanding the mine's operation. Mitch and Tanner led her on a tour of the claim, explaining the mining process and showing her the disputed eastern tunnel where the richest silver vein had been discovered. Belle listened attentively, asking questions that impressed both men with her quick comprehension. Your father would be proud, Mitch remarked as they returned to the cabin. Not many women would tackle mining law the way you did today. News travels fast, Belle observed. Silverton Telegraph, Tanner said with a slight smile. Faster than Western Union. As afternoon shadows lengthened, they prepared to return to town. Belle felt a new determination after seeing the mine. This was her father's legacy, and she wouldn't surrender it without a fight. The ride back was largely silent, each lost in their own thoughts. As they approached Silverton, Tanner finally spoke. Whatever happens tomorrow, be careful. Caldwell doesn't like losing. I appreciate your concern, Mr. Royce, but I can take care of myself. His blue eyes studied her with unexpected intensity. I believe you can, Miss Emerson. Just remember, there's no shame in accepting help when it's offered. That evening, Belle dined in her room, reviewing her notes for the morning's decision. Sleep came fitfully, her dreams filled with dark mine shafts and Victor Caldwell's cold smile. The courthouse was even more crowded the next morning. Belle took her place at the front, aware of whispers and stares. She spotted Tanner leaning against the back wall, his presence oddly reassuring. Judge Winters wasted no time with preliminaries. After reviewing the evidence presented, this court finds in favor of the Emerson claim. The boundaries of the Blue Bonnet mine as originally registered are hereby confirmed and the challenge is dismissed. A collective gasp went up from the assembly. Belle sat stunned, hardly believing her ears. She'd won. Victor Caldwell's face contorted with rage. He rose abruptly and stormed out, his attorney scurrying after him. The spectators began to disperse, several nodding to Belle with newfound respect. "Congratulations," Tanner said, appearing at her side. "That's the first time I've seen Caldwell lose a claim dispute." "Thank you," Belle replied, still processing her victory. "I should return to the mine, make arrangements for its continued operation." "I'd be happy to help with that," he offered. "Mining's a complicated business." Belle studied him, considering the offer. "Why did you really come to the hearing yesterday, Mr. Royce? You barely knew my father." Tanner hesitated. "Your father saved my life last winter." "Cave-in at the Silverton Company's North Mine, I was trapped for 2 days. Harold was the one who figured out how to shore up the tunnel to get me out." His expression darkened. The same tunnel collapsed on him 3 months later when he was helping recover bodies from another accident. "You think it wasn't an accident," Belle said slowly, realization dawning. "I think Caldwell discovered the eastern vein crossed into Blue Bonnet territory and wanted the claim when your father refused to sell. He left the implication hanging." Belle felt a chill despite the warm day. "Then my victory today makes you Caldwell's new target," Tanner finished grimly. "You should leave town, Miss Emerson, sell the claim and go back east. And let him win after all." Belle shook her head. "I won't be intimidated, Mr. Royce." They parted outside the courthouse, Belle heading toward the assayer's office to discuss the mine's recent ore samples. The streets were busy with midday traffic wagons delivering goods, miners heading to saloons for their midday meal, ladies shopping at the mercantile. Belle was crossing toward Blair Street when she heard shouting. A runaway wagon came barreling down the road, the driver frantically pulling on the reins of panicked horses. People scattered from its path, but Belle, caught in the middle of the street, froze in momentary terror. Strong hands suddenly yanked her backward, and she stumbled against a solid chest as the wagon thundered past, missing her by inches. Heart pounding, she looked up to find Tanner Royce holding her steady. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice tight with concern. "No, I thank you," she managed, suddenly aware of his arms still around her. She stepped back, composing herself. "That was too close." Tanner's expression was grim. "Too close and too convenient. That wagon came straight at you, Miss Emerson." "Surely you don't think—" "I think nothing in this town happens by accident when it involves Caldwell's interests." He glanced around, noting the curious onlookers. "Come on, let's get you somewhere safe." He escorted her back to the hotel, insisting on checking the lobby and stairwell before allowing her to proceed to her room. Belle found his protectiveness both irritating and oddly comforting. "This is unnecessary, Mr. Royce," she protested as he examined the lock on her door. "Humor me," he replied. "Keep your door locked and don't go out alone until we figure out how to handle Caldwell." Belle raised an eyebrow. Tanner met her gaze steadily. "I owe your father my life, Miss Emerson. And I've been looking for a way to bring Caldwell's operations into the light for some time now. Your fight is mine." Something in his direct gaze made Belle's pulse quicken in a way that had nothing to do with danger. "Very well, Mr. Royce. I accept your assistance, professionally speaking." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Of course, professionally speaking." Over the next few days, Belle and Tanner developed a strategy for securing the Blue Bonnet mine. Belle met with the miners, reassuring them of their continued employment and implementing safety improvements her father had planned. Tanner handled security, hiring trusted men to guard the claim and escort ore shipments. To Belle's surprise, she found herself genuinely interested in the mining operation. Her education had prepared her for managing investments, not extracting silver from mountainsides, but she discovered an aptitude for the business aspects of mining. "You have your father's head for details," Mitch remarked one afternoon as they reviewed production reports. "He'd be mighty pleased to see you taking an interest." "I never understood his fascination with silver mining," Belle admitted. "Our correspondence was always formal reports on yields and expenses. I thought he came west simply to make his fortune." Mitch shook his head. It was never about the money for Harold. It was the challenge pitting himself against the mountain, outsmarting nature. He wanted to build something that would last. Belle felt a pang of regret for all the things she'd never known about her father. I wish I'd come to visit him. Maybe I would have understood. He talked about you all the time, Mitch said gently. Had your portrait right there on his desk. Was saving up to bring you out here, maybe even send you to that fancy college you mentioned in your letters. The revelation brought tears to Belle's eyes. She'd assumed her father had abandoned his family for the lure of Western riches. Instead, he'd been working to secure her future. As Belle settled into life in Silverton, she found herself growing comfortable with Tanner's constant presence. He was unlike any man she'd known in Philadelphia, straightforward, unpolished, but possessed of an integrity that she found increasingly attractive. For his part, Tanner seemed to regard Belle with a mixture of admiration and bewilderment. Her determination to run the mine herself confounded his expectations, yet he respected her intelligence and courage. Most women would have sold out and fled back east by now, he commented as they rode back to town one evening. I'm not most women, Mr. Royce. He smiled, the expression transforming his weathered face. I noticed that the first time I saw you standing up to Judge Winters. Their growing companionship did not go unnoticed in Silverton. Whispers followed them through town speculation about the Eastern lady and the rugged mine foreman. Belle ignored the gossip, focusing instead on establishing herself as a legitimate business owner. Victor Caldwell, meanwhile, had been ominously quiet. His mining company continued operations, but he made no further direct moves against the Blue Bonnet. Belle might have believed he'd accepted defeat if not for Tanner's continued vigilance and occasional reports of Caldwell's men watching the mine. The situation came to a head 3 weeks after Belle's arrival in Silverton. The town was celebrating Independence Day with a social at the newly constructed town hall, a rare opportunity for the community to gather for something other than business or church. Belle had initially declined to attend, preferring to avoid potential confrontation with Caldwell, but Mitch's wife Mary had insisted. You can't hide away forever, dear, the older woman had said. Besides, half the unmarried men in the county will be there hoping for a dance with the new mine owner. So Belle found herself dressed in her best gown of forest green silk with modest lace trim, far simpler than what she might have worn to a Philadelphia social, but the finest thing Silverton had seen in some time. Mary had helped arrange her hair, pinning the auburn waves into an elegant chignon. You look lovely, Mary declared. Your father would be so proud to see you taking your place in the community. The town hall was decorated with bunting and paper lanterns, a small band playing in the corner. Despite her reservations, Belle found herself enjoying the festivities. The townspeople who had initially viewed her with suspicion now greeted her warmly, impressed by her determination to continue her father's work. She had just finished a polka with the town doctor when she spotted Tanner entering the hall. He looked different in his formal attire, a dark suit that fit his broad shoulders surprisingly well, his usually wind-blown hair neatly combed. Their eyes met across the room, and something unspoken passed between them. He made his way toward her, nodding to acquaintances but keeping his gaze on Belle. Miss Emerson, he said with a slight bow, you look beautiful tonight. Thank you, Mr. Royce, you clean up rather well yourself. A faint smile touched his lips. May I have the next dance? The band struck up a waltz, and Belle found herself in Tanner's arms, surprisingly graceful for a man who spent his days in mine shafts and on horseback. I didn't take you for a dancer, she remarked. My mother insisted all her sons learn. Said a man never knows when he'll need to impress a lady. His blue eyes held hers. I'm grateful for her foresight tonight. Belle felt a blush rising to her cheeks. Mr. Royce, Tanner, he corrected softly. After facing down claim jumpers and runaway wagons together, I think we've earned first names, Belle. The sound of her name on his lips sent an unexpected thrill through her. Tanner, then. I want to thank you for all you've done these past weeks. I couldn't have managed without your help. You'd have found a way, he replied with conviction. You're the most capable woman I've ever met. The waltz ended too soon, and Belle reluctantly stepped back from his embrace. The evening continued pleasantly, with Belle dividing her time between various dance partners and conversations with townsfolk. She noticed Tanner watching her from across the room, his attentiveness both reassuring and distracting. As the celebration reached its peak, Belle stepped outside for a moment of fresh air. The night was clear, stars brilliantly visible above the mountains. She was admiring the view when the door opened behind her. "Enjoying our wild country, Miss Emerson." Victor Caldwell's voice shattered her peaceful moment. Belle turned, instinctively straightening her shoulders. "Mr. Caldwell, I'm surprised to see you here. I wouldn't miss a civic celebration." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Besides, I wanted to congratulate you personally on your tenacity. Most women would have sold that worthless mine and returned to civilization by now. The blue bonnet is hardly worthless, as you well know." Caldwell stepped closer. "Perhaps not now, but mines have a way of becoming unprofitable very suddenly. Tunnels collapse, equipment fails, all sorts of accidents happen." "Are you threatening me, Mr. Caldwell?" Belle asked, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Merely stating facts, my dear. Silverton is a dangerous place for a woman alone." His gaze traveled over her in a way that made her skin crawl. "I could still make you a generous offer for the blue bonnet, enough to live very comfortably back east. I'm not alone and I'm not selling." Caldwell's expression hardened. "Your father was equally stubborn. Look where it got him." "What exactly are you implying about my father's death?" Belle demanded, anger overriding her fear. "Nothing at all," Caldwell replied smoothly. "Merely that mining accidents are common. Your pet Cowboy should know he nearly died in one himself." "Mr. Royce is my foreman, not my pet," Belle said coldly. Caldwell laughed. "Is that what they're calling it these days? The whole town is talking about you too, the lady mine owner and her rough-hewn protector, quite the romantic tale." Belle felt heat rising to her face. "You're being ridiculous." "Am I? I wonder what your Philadelphia friends would think of your frontier romance. Such relationships are tolerated here out of necessity, but I imagine society back east would take a different view." Before Belle could respond, the door opened again and Tanner stepped out. He assessed the situation instantly, moving to Belle's side. "Everything all right here?" he asked, his tone deceptively casual. "Perfectly fine," Caldwell answered before Belle could speak. "Miss Emerson and I were discussing business." "Looks like the discussion is over," Tanner replied, his hand moving protectively to Belle's elbow. Caldwell's eyes narrowed at the gesture. "Indeed. Good evening, Miss Emerson. Consider my offer and my warning." With a curt nod, he returned inside. When he was gone, Belle released a shaky breath. "He as much as admitted to causing my father's death." Tanner's expression darkened. "Did he threaten you directly?" "Not in so many words. He's too clever for that." Belle shivered, suddenly cold despite the warm July evening. "He also made insinuations about us." Tanner's jaw tightened. "Trying to damage your reputation. It's an old tactic. If he can't get the mine through legal means or intimidation, he'll try to drive you out by turning the town against you." "It's absurd," Belle said, more affected by the implication than she cared to admit. "As if I would be concerned about gossip when my father's legacy is at stake." Tanner studied her face in the moonlight. "Would you be concerned, I mean?" The question caught her off guard. "About gossip?" "I've faced worse in Philadelphia drawing rooms." "About us," he clarified, his voice dropping lower. "About what people might think if there was any truth to the rumors." Belle's heart skipped a beat. The door burst open again, this time revealing Mary Cooper's worried face. "There you are. Belle, dear, you must come quickly. Some of the miners have had too much to drink, and there's an argument brewing about the Blue Bonnet's new safety regulations." The moment broken, Belle and Tanner hurried inside to find several of her miners in a heated exchange with men from Caldwell's operation. Accusations flew about unnecessarily strict rules and wasted time on safety measures. Belle stepped forward, her voice carrying across the room. "Gentlemen, this is hardly the place for such discussions. If you have concerns about the Blue Bonnet's operations, my office is open tomorrow morning." Her calm authority quieted the argument, though tensions remained high. The celebration continued, but with a strained undercurrent. Belle noted Caldwell watching from the corner, a satisfied smile on his face. He'd orchestrated the confrontation. She was certain another attempt to undermine her position in the community. The incident cast a shadow over the remainder of the evening. When the celebration finally wound down, Tanner insisted on escorting Belle back to the hotel. Caldwell's getting desperate, he observed as they walked through the quiet streets. That means he's planning something more direct. What can we do? Belle asked. I have an idea, but you're not going to like it. Tanner hesitated. There's a federal mining inspector in Durango investigating safety violations. If we can get him to examine Caldwell's operation, he might find evidence of tampering in the tunnel where your father died. Belle considered this. That would require proof to warrant an investigation. I know where to look, Tanner replied grimly. I worked that tunnel before your father. There were support beams that shouldn't have failed unless someone wanted them to. That's incredibly dangerous, Tanner. It's the only way to prove what Caldwell did. The inspector won't come without evidence. Belle stopped walking, turning to face him in the moonlight. I won't risk losing another person I care about to that man's greed. The admission hung between them, neither acknowledging nor dismissing the depth of feeling it revealed. Finally, Tanner spoke. We'll find another way then. They reached the hotel, pausing at the entrance. The streets were deserted, most of Silverton's residents still at the celebration or already home in bed. Thank you for the dance, Belle said softly. Thank you for coming to Silverton, Tanner replied, his voice equally low. Despite everything, I'm glad you did. Something in his gaze made Belle's breath catch. For a moment, she thought he might kiss her and realized with surprise that she wanted him to. Instead, he simply touched his hat brim in a gesture that had become familiar. Good night, Belle. Good night, Tanner. As she climbed the stairs to her room, Belle reflected on how dramatically her life had changed in just 3 weeks. She had come to Silverton expecting to settle her father's affairs quickly and return to Philadelphia. Now she found herself running a silver mine, facing down a dangerous enemy and developing feelings for a man as different from her eastern suitors as the mountains were from city streets. The next morning brought heavy clouds and the threat of rain. Belle met with the miners who had voiced concerns at the celebration, patiently explaining the safety measures and their importance. Most were reasonable once sober, though a few remained resistant. Your father didn't waste time with all these checks and inspections, complained one veteran miner. My father died in a mine collapse, Belle replied evenly. I won't risk more lives through negligence. By mid-afternoon, the sky had darkened further and thunder rolled through the mountains. Belle was reviewing accounts in the mine office when Mitch burst in, soaked from the beginning rainfall. Trouble at the eastern tunnel, he gasped. Water's coming in faster than the pumps can handle. We need to evacuate the men. Belle grabbed her rein slicker. Is everyone accounted for? All but Tanner. He went in to check the lower level when the rain started. Fear clutched at Belle's heart, but she kept her voice steady. Send 2 men to find him, then get everyone else out. I'll check the pump station. The mine was chaos when they arrived. Rain poured relentlessly, turning the ground to mud and complicating the evacuation. Miners emerged from the tunnels, some helping injured companions. Belle counted heads frantically, searching for Tanner's tall figure among them. The rescue party returned, supporting a limping miner between them. Found Jenkins with a twisted ankle, one reported. No sign of Royce, but the lower tunnel's flooding fast. Support beams are starting to crack. He must still be down there, Belle said, dread filling her. We need to find him. Too dangerous, Miss Emerson, Mitch protested. That tunnel could go any minute. Then I'll go myself, she declared, grabbing a lantern. My father didn't abandon his men, and neither will I. Before anyone could stop her, Belle entered the mine, her lantern casting eerie shadows on the rough-hewn walls. She descended carefully, the sound of rushing water growing louder with each step. The wooden supports groaned ominously, mud and water seeping through widening cracks. Tanner, she called, her voice echoing in the tunnels. Tanner, where are you? A faint response came from ahead. Belle pushed forward, her skirts heavy with mud, until she found him pinned beneath a fallen timber, water rising around him. Belle, his voice was strained with pain. What are you doing? Get out of here. Not without you. She set down the lantern and examined the timber. It had struck his leg but didn't appear to be crushing him. He was trapped rather than seriously injured. "Can you move at all?" "If I can get leverage," he grunted, struggling to shift his position. Together, they managed to free his leg just as a terrifying crack sounded overhead. Tanner pulled Belle against him as debris showered down around them. "We need to move. Now." He stood shakily, wincing at weight on his injured legs. Supporting each other, they made their way back through the flooding tunnel. Water now reached their knees, making progress difficult. When they finally emerged into the rain-soaked daylight, the waiting miners cheered. Mitch hurried forward to help Tanner, while Mary wrapped a blanket around Belle's shoulders. "That was the bravest, most foolish thing I've ever seen," she scolded, hugging Belle tightly. Belle barely heard her, her attention fixed on Tanner as the mine doctor examined his leg. When he looked up and met her gaze, the relief and something deeper in his eyes made her heart stutter. Later, after Tanner's leg had been bandaged and the worst of the storm had passed, Belle sat beside him in the cabin, both still damp despite dry clothes and the fire blazing in the hearth. "You shouldn't have come after me," Tanner said, breaking the comfortable silence. "It was too dangerous." "Says the man who was planning to sneak into Caldwell's mine for evidence," Belle retorted. "Besides, I couldn't just leave you down there." Tanner's expression softened. "No, I suppose you couldn't. It's not in your nature to abandon people." "Unlike what I thought of my father," Belle admitted. "I always believed he abandoned us for adventure and fortune. I was so wrong about him." "He talked about you constantly," Tanner said. "How smart you were, how determined. He said you got that from your mother." Belle smiled sadly. "She was formidable. When she died 5 years ago, I thought my father would come home. When he didn't, I was so angry with him." "He wanted to build something worthy of you," Tanner said gently, "something that would secure your future. And now I'm fighting to preserve it." Belle sighed, watching the fire. "I never expected to care about the blue bonnet or about Silverton." "And now?" Tanner asked, his eyes intent on her face. Belle met his gaze steadily. "Now I can't imagine leaving." The confession hung between them, layered with meaning neither was ready to fully articulate. Outside, the rain continued falling, gentler now, washing the mountainside clean. The storm's aftermath brought unexpected developments. The flooding had revealed a new vein in the eastern tunnel richer than anything the Blue Bonnet had produced before. Word spread quickly through Silverton, bringing renewed attention to Belle's mine and, inevitably, to Caldwell's grudge against it. 3 days after the storm, as Belle was returning from the assayer's office with the promising new ore samples results, she encountered Victor Caldwell on the boardwalk outside the mercantile. He blocked her path, his expression thunderous. "You think you've won, don't you?" he said without preamble. First the claim dispute, now this new strike. The Eastern Society girl turning mining magnate. It makes a charming story. "Excuse me, Mr. Caldwell, I have business to attend to." Belle attempted to step around him, but he moved to block her again. "Your luck won't hold, Miss Emerson. That mine has already claimed your father. How many more lives will it take before you admit defeat?" Belle felt anger rise within her. "My father's death wasn't bad luck, was it, Mr. Caldwell? You arranged it when he refused to sell." Caldwell's face hardened. "Careful with your accusations. Slander is a serious offense, even in a backwater like Silverton." "It's not slander if it's true," Belle replied, meeting his gaze unflinchingly. "I have men investigating the collapse that killed my father. If they find evidence of tampering, you'll what? Take it to the sheriff." Caldwell laughed coldly. "Sheriff Brennan knows which side his bread is buttered on." "Then I'll take it to the federal authorities," Belle said. "I'm sure they'd be interested in criminal negligence in the mines." Something dangerous flashed in Caldwell's eyes. "You're playing a game you don't understand, Miss Emerson. This is the frontier, not some Philadelphia drawing room. Out here, problems are sometimes solved more directly." "Is that a threat, a reality check?" He leaned closer. "You think your cowboy protector can save you? Royce is nothing but a drifter with a knack for surviving mine accidents. Eventually, his luck will run out too." The veiled threat against Tanner sent a chill through Belle. Before she could respond, a familiar voice called her name. Mary Cooper hurried toward them, packages in hand. "Belle, there you are. I've been looking everywhere for you." Mary glanced between Belle and Caldwell, sensing the tension. "Mr. Caldwell, good afternoon." Caldwell straightened, his public face sliding back into place. "Mrs. Cooper." "Lovely day, isn't it?" "Indeed. Belle, dear, we should hurry if we're to finish our errands before the rain returns." Mary linked her arm through Belle's, effectively separating her from Caldwell. With a tight smile, Caldwell tipped his hat. "Ladies, good day to you both." He walked away, his rigid posture betraying his anger. "That man gives me chills," Mary said when he was out of earshot. "What did he want? To frighten me into selling the blue bonnet," Belle replied, her heart still racing from the confrontation. "And he threatened Tanner." Mary's expression grew concerned. "Caldwell doesn't make idle threats, Belle. You both need to be careful." The warning proved prescient. That evening, as Belle was dining at the hotel restaurant, a breathless young miner burst in. "Miss Emerson, there's a fire at the mine office." Belle rushed outside to find the night sky illuminated by flames on the mountainside. By the time she reached the mine, riding with several volunteers who had responded to the alarm, the office building was fully engulfed. Tanner directed the firefighting efforts, organizing a bucket line from the nearby stream. His face was streaked with soot, his expression grim as he spotted Belle. "Stay back," he warned. "We've got it contained to the office, but the records, I have copies at the hotel," Belle assured him, relief flooding her at the sight of him unharmed. "Was anyone hurt?" "No, thankfully. Mitch discovered it early, but there wasn't much we could do." Tanner's eyes narrowed. "This wasn't an accident, Belle. The fire started outside the building, not from a stove or lantern." "Caldwell," Belle said, certainty in her voice. "He threatened me today and now this." "What exactly did he say?" Tanner asked sharply. Belle recounted the confrontation, including Caldwell's veiled threat against Tanner. His expression darkened as she spoke. "That tears it," he said when she finished. "We can't wait for more evidence. I'm riding to Durango tomorrow to speak with the federal inspector directly." "I'm coming with you," Belle declared. "Caldwell needs to be stopped before someone else gets hurt." Tanner looked as if he might argue, then nodded. "We'll leave at first light. Pack light, it's a hard ride." The journey to Durango took 2 days of difficult travel through mountain passes still muddy from recent rains. Belle, though an accomplished rider, found herself exhausted by the grueling pace. Yet she refused to complain, determined to match Tanner's endurance. They reached Durango as evening fell, the larger town's gas lamps and brick buildings a stark contrast to Silverton's frontier simplicity. After securing rooms at a hotel considerably more refined than Silverton's establishment, they sought out federal mining inspector Walter Hammond. The inspector, a serious man with spectacles and a meticulously trimmed beard, listened attentively as Belle and Tanner presented their case. The suspicious circumstances of Harold Emerson's death, Caldwell's threats, the fire at the mine office together, they painted a compelling picture of corruption and intimidation. "This is troubling," Hammond acknowledged when they finished. "But accusations against a man of Caldwell's standing require substantial evidence." "We understand," Belle said. "That's why we're asking for an official investigation. My father deserves justice and other miners deserve to work in safe conditions." Hammond studied her thoughtfully. "Your father was respected in mining circles, Miss Emerson. His innovations in tunnel reinforcement were quite remarkable." He closed the notebook where he'd been recording their statements. "I'll come to Silverton next week to conduct an inspection of both operations, yours and Caldwell's." "Thank you," Belle said, relief evident in her voice. "That's all we ask." As they left the inspector's office, Tanner placed a hand lightly at the small of Belle's back, guiding her through the unfamiliar streets. The simple gesture felt intimate, a reminder of how their relationship had evolved beyond professional boundaries. "We should celebrate," Tanner suggested as they approached the hotel. "Durango has an actual restaurant with tablecloths and everything." Belle smiled, realizing how rare it was to see him relaxed. "That sounds wonderful. I can't remember the last time I had a meal that wasn't hotel fare or Mary's cooking." The restaurant was indeed a step above Silverton's offerings, An elegant establishment with crystal glasses and a French-trained chef who had somehow found his way to southwestern Colorado. Over a meal of beef tenderloin and imported wine, Belle and Tanner spoke of lighter matters, their childhoods, favorite books, places they hoped to visit. "I never expected to enjoy the West so much," Belle admitted as they lingered over coffee. "In Philadelphia, everything was so structured, so predictable. Here, each day brings something new. Not all of it pleasant," Tanner observed wryly. "No," Belle agreed, "but authentic. I feel more alive here than I ever did back east." Tanner's eyes softened as he looked at her across the table, candlelight gilding her features. "Silverton suits you. You've changed since you arrived, grown more confident." "I've had to," Belle replied. "When your life is threatened on a regular basis, you either find your courage or you flee." "And you're not the fleeing type," Tanner said with a smile. "Neither are you." Belle hesitated, then asked the question that had been on her mind for weeks. "Why did you stay in Silverton after the accident? Most men would have moved on." Tanner was quiet for a moment. "I wanted to understand what happened. The tunnel that collapsed shouldn't have failed. I helped build those supports myself. When I started asking questions, Caldwell offered me a job as foreman at his North mine, twice the pay I was making. To keep you quiet," Belle concluded. "I refused." "That's when the accident started. Minor things at first. A cut brake line on my wagon, tampered saddle cinch." His expression darkened. "Then your father hired me for the Blue Bonnet. He was asking the same questions I was. 3 weeks later, he was dead." Belle reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. "It wasn't your fault, Tanner. I should have been more careful, warned him about Caldwell's methods." He turned his hand to clasp hers, his calloused fingers warm against her skin. "I won't make the same mistake with you, Belle." The intensity in his voice made her heart race. "I trust you, Tanner, more than anyone I've ever known." Something shifted between them in that moment, an acknowledgement of feelings that had been growing since that first meeting in the courthouse. When they eventually left the restaurant, they walked more closely together, their hands occasionally brushing as if seeking connection. The return journey to Silverton the next day seemed easier somehow, despite the difficult terrain. They arrived late in the afternoon to find the town in an uproar. Sheriff Brennan was waiting at the livery stable when they rode in. "Miss Emerson," he called, his expression unusually grave. "There's been an incident at the Blue Bonnet." Belle's heart dropped. "Was anyone hurt?" "No, madam, but you'd better come quick. Your men are about ready to march on Caldwell's place with guns drawn." They followed the sheriff up the mountain to find the Blue Bonnet in chaos. The newly discovered silver vein had been dynamited, collapsing a section of the eastern tunnel. Mitch Cooper was barely restraining a group of furious miners, while Mary tended to a young worker with a head injury. "What happened?" Belle demanded, dismounting quickly. "Caldwell's men," Mitch spat. "Came in last night claiming they were checking survey markers. Must have planted charges when no one was looking. Waited until shift changed this morning to detonate them." Tanner examined the damage, his expression grim. "They knew exactly where to place the charges for maximum damage. This was professional work." Sheriff Brennan shifted uncomfortably. "Now we don't know for certain it was Caldwell's doing. Who else would benefit from destroying our richest vein?" Belle interrupted. "Sheriff, this is criminal destruction of property at the very least, attempted murder at worst. Men could have been killed." "I understand you're upset, Miss Emerson, but without evidence, we have evidence," Tanner cut in. "Federal Mining Inspector Hammond is coming next week to investigate Caldwell's operation. I suggest you start doing your job, Sheriff, unless you want to explain to federal authorities why you've ignored systematic sabotage and intimidation." The sheriff's face reddened. "That sounds mighty close to accusing me of corruption, Royce." "If the badge fits," Tanner replied coldly. Tensions threatened to erupt into violence until Belle stepped between the men. "Enough. Sheriff, I expect you to investigate this incident thoroughly. In the meantime, we have a mine to secure and miners who need reassurance about their jobs." With obvious reluctance, the sheriff began questioning witnesses while Belle and Tanner assessed the damage with Mitch. The news was grim. Repairs would take weeks and cost hundreds of dollars the Blue Bonnet could ill afford to spend. This is what Caldwell wanted, Belle realized. He couldn't legally take the claim, so he's trying to financially ruin it. Without the income from that new vein, we'll struggle to make payroll. We still have the Western Tunnel producing, Mitch pointed out. Not as rich, but steady. And I have some savings, Tanner added. It's not much, but it might help with immediate expenses. Belle shook her head. I can't ask you to invest your savings, Tanner. You didn't ask, I'm offering. His eyes held hers. I believe in the blue bonnet, Belle, I believe in you. The simple declaration, made amid the chaos of the sabotaged mine, affected Belle more deeply than any flowery profession of devotion ever could. Before she could respond, Mary approached with news that Caldwell had been seen riding toward town with several men. He's planning something, Tanner said grimly. We should get back to Silverton. They rode down the mountain trail in tense silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Belle found herself mentally calculating the Blue Bonnet's resources, wondering if they could survive this latest setback. She had funds in Philadelphia she could transfer, but it would take weeks to arrange. Silverton seemed unnaturally quiet when they arrived. Most businesses were open, but few people moved along the streets. As they passed the saloon, a drunk miner stumbled out the batwing doors. Well, if it ain't the lady mine owner and her pet gunslinger, he slurred. Heard your mine took a beating today, shame about that. Tanner's hand moved to his gun belt, but Belle placed a restraining hand on his arm. Not worth it, she murmured. The miner laughed. Better listen to your woman, Royce. Caldwell's got big plans for you both. What plans? Belle demanded, but the miner merely grinned and staggered away. I don't like this, Tanner said, scanning the quiet street. Something's not right. They reached the hotel to find Victor Caldwell himself waiting in the lobby, lounging in a chair as if he owned the establishment. Which, Belle realized, he probably did. Miss Emerson, Mr. Royce, he greeted them with false cordiality. I heard about the unfortunate accident at your mine. Such a dangerous business we're in. That was no accident, Belle said coldly, and we both know it. Caldwell shrugged, unperturbed by the accusation. Mining is unpredictable. One day you're striking it rich, the next you're struggling to meet expenses. He examined his manicured nails. I understand the Blue Bonnet may be facing financial difficulties. My offer to purchase the claim still stands, though naturally, the price has been adjusted to reflect recent developments. The Blue Bonnet isn't for sale, Belle declared. Not now, not ever. Such determination, Caldwell mocked. But how long can you hold out? Your miners need to be paid, equipment needs repair, and now you have a collapsed tunnel to clear. He stood, straightening his jacket. I'll give you 3 days to reconsider. After that, my offer will be withdrawn permanently. Is that another threat? Tanner asked, his voice deceptively calm. Caldwell smiled thinly. Merely a business assessment, Mr. Royce. Good day to you both. After he left, Belle released a shaky breath. He's so confident we'll fail. Because he's used to winning, Tanner replied. Men like Caldwell don't understand people who fight for principles rather than profit. That evening, Belle and Tanner met with Mitch and Mary in the hotel dining room to discuss their options. The situation was dire without the income from the Eastern vein. The Blue Bonnet had barely enough funds to cover 2 more weeks of operation. We could reduce the workforce temporarily, Mitch suggested reluctantly. Focus on the Western Tunnel with a skeleton crew until we can afford to repair the damage. And leave families without income. Belle shook her head. There must be another way. Mary, who had been quietly listening, suddenly spoke up. What about the ore samples from the new vein? Didn't you have them assayed before the explosion? Belle nodded. Yes, they showed exceptional silver content, but could you use those results to secure a loan from the bank? Mary pressed. Or find investors in Durango? Tanner straightened in his chair. That's brilliant, Mary. With the assay reports and the mine's production history, we could approach investors who aren't under Caldwell's influence. Hope began to replace despair as they developed the plan. Belle would return to Durango the next day with the assay reports and production records, while Tanner and Mitch would keep the Western Tunnel operating and assess repair options for the damaged section. I should go with you, Tanner insisted when they discussed the journey. Caldwell might try something. He needs to believe we're desperate, Belle countered. If we both leave, he'll suspect we're seeking outside help. Besides, the miners trust you. They need your leadership right now." Tanner reluctantly agreed, though he insisted on selecting the two miners who would escort Belle to Durango, experienced men he trusted implicitly. The next morning dawned clear and cool, perfect weather for traveling. Belle dressed carefully in her most businesslike attire, determined to project confidence to potential investors. As she was packing the last of the documents, a knock came at her hotel room door. "Who is it?" she called, cautious after yesterday's confrontation. "Tanner." She opened the door to find him standing there, his expression uncharacteristically uncertain. "I wanted to see you before you left," he said. Belle invited him in, suddenly aware of the intimacy of him being in her private room. He seemed to feel it too, keeping a careful distance between them. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew a small revolver, well-maintained and sized for a woman's hand. "It was my mother's. She carried it when my father was away on cattle drives." "Tanner, I can't take this," Belle protested. "Please." He pressed it into her hand. "It would ease my mind to know you can protect yourself if necessary." The concern in his eyes touched her deeply. "Thank you, I'll return it safely when I come back." "Just come back," he said softly. "That's all that matters." The moment stretched between them, filled with words neither was ready to speak aloud. Finally, Tanner cleared his throat. "Your escorts are waiting at the livery. The gray mare is saddled for you. She's steady on mountain trails." "Thank you for everything, Tanner." Belle impulsively reached up and kissed his cheek, a brief touch that nevertheless sent warmth spreading through her. "Take care of Armine." His smile transformed his face. "Armine, I like the sound of that." The journey to Durango passed without incident, Belle and her escorts making good time on the now familiar trail. In Durango, she met with several potential investors, presenting the Blue Bonnets case with passionate conviction. By the end of the second day, she had secured conditional commitments from two investors, pending their own experts' inspection of the mine. She also visited Inspector Hammond, who confirmed he would arrive in Silverton within the week to investigate both the Blue Bonnet and Caldwell's operations. With her mission accomplished more quickly than expected, Belle decided to return to Silverton a day early, eager to share the good news. They set out at dawn, hoping to reach Silverton by nightfall. The weather held clear, though dark clouds gathered over the distant peaks as the day progressed. Belle's spirits were high despite the physical discomfort of the long ride. They had a fighting chance now, legitimate investors and federal attention that even Caldwell couldn't ignore. The attack came without warning as they navigated a narrow section of trail with a steep drop on one side and a rock face on the other. Three masked men emerged from behind boulders, rifles aimed at Belle and her escorts. "That's far enough," one called. "Throw down your weapons." Belle's escorts hesitated, clearly calculating the odds. "Do as they say," she urged quietly. "We're outnumbered." Reluctantly, the miners dropped their guns. Belle slowly reached into her pocket, fingers closing around Tanner's revolver. "The lady, too," the masked man ordered. "Whatever you're reaching for, drop it." Belle withdrew her hand empty. "We have nothing of value," she said steadily. "Just let us pass." "Oh, you're valuable, all right," another masked man said with a chuckle. "Caldwell's paying top dollar to make sure you don't reach Silverton." "You work for Caldwell?" Belle asked, stalling for time as she assessed their options. The trail was too narrow to attempt escape on horseback, and the drop beside them was easily 50 feet to the rocks below. "Lady, in these parts, everyone works for Caldwell one way or another." The first man gestured with his rifle. "Now, you're going to turn those horses around and head back to Durango. By the time you get there, the Blue Bonnet will be Caldwell's." "What's he planning?" Belle demanded. "Not your concern, move it." One of Belle's escorts suddenly spurred his horse forward, catching the masked men by surprise. Shots rang out, and the miner fell from his saddle, clutching his shoulder. In the confusion, Belle yanked her horse sideways, blocking the narrow trail as she pulled Tanner's revolver from her pocket. "Drop your weapons," she commanded, her voice stronger than she felt. The bandits hesitated, clearly not expecting resistance from a woman. Belle used their momentary confusion to fire a warning shot into the air. The sound echoed through the mountains, startling birds from nearby trees. "The next one won't miss," she warned, hoping they couldn't see her trembling hand. For a tense moment, no one moved. Then the leader slowly lowered his rifle. "This ain't worth dying over," he muttered to his companions. Caldwell didn't say nothing about the lady being armed. They backed away, disappearing into the rocks from which they'd emerged. Belle kept her revolver raised until she was certain they were gone, then hurried to the injured miner's side. The bullet had passed through his shoulder, painful but not life-threatening if they could stop the bleeding. "We need to get him to Silverton," she told the other escort. "Can you ride with him?" Using strips torn from her petticoat, Belle bandaged the wound as best she could. They fashioned a makeshift sling and helped the injured man onto his companion's horse. The journey would be slower now, but Belle was determined to reach Silverton before nightfall. "Caldwell's planning something," she said as they carefully resumed their journey. "That's why they wanted to delay us." "Whatever it is," the uninjured miner replied grimly, "it can't be good for the Blue Bonnet." They pushed on as quickly as possible, mindful of their injured companion but driven by growing concern. When they finally crested the last ridge overlooking Silverton, the sun was setting behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the valley. What they saw made Belle's heart stop. Thick smoke rose from the direction of the Blue Bonnet mine, dark plumes visible even in the fading light. Without a word, she spurred her horse forward, fear giving way to desperate determination. The scene at the mine was chaos. The headframe was ablaze, flames leaping high into the darkening sky. Miners worked frantically to extinguish the fire, forming bucket brigades from the nearby stream. Others helped injured companions away from the burning structures. Belle dismounted before her horse had fully stopped, scanning the crowd for Tanner. She spotted Mitch first, his face blackened with soot as he directed firefighting efforts. "Mitch, what happened? Where's Tanner?" Mitch turned, relief crossing his features when he saw her. "Belle, thank God you're safe. Caldwell's men attacked about an hour ago. Armed gang, at least a dozen, said they had orders to burn the mine if you didn't return with a signed bill of sale." "And Tanner?" Belle pressed, dread building inside her. Mitch's expression grew grave. "He was in the office when they arrived, tried to hold them off while the miners evacuated. Last I saw, he was fighting 3 of Caldwell's men near the supply shed." Belle ran toward the indicated building, ignoring Mitch's shouts to wait. The supply shed was away from the main fire, but smoke drifted across the entire mine yard, making it difficult to see. She called Tanner's name, desperation in her voice. A moan from behind a stack of timber drew her attention. She found Tanner there, lying on his side, blood staining his shirt from a wound in his left shoulder. "Tanner," she knelt beside him, hands hovering uncertainly over his injured form, his eyes fluttered open, focusing slowly on her face. "Belle, you're supposed to be in Durango. We came back early," she explained, examining his wound with trembling fingers. "Caldwell's men tried to ambush us on the trail." "Are you hurt?" he asked, struggling to sit up despite his injury. "I'm fine. Your mother's revolver came in handy." Belle supported him as he leaned against the timber stack. "We need to get you to a doctor." "Not yet," Tanner insisted. "Caldwell was here himself, said if the Blue Bonnet wouldn't be his, it wouldn't be anyone's." A crash from the direction of the mine entrance drew their attention. The burning headframe had partially collapsed, sending sparks high into the night sky. Belle felt tears sting her eyes at the destruction of her father's legacy. "Everything he worked for," she whispered. "It's all gone." Tanner's hand found hers, his grip surprisingly strong despite his injury. "Buildings can be rebuilt. The mine itself is still there. If we can afford to repair it," Belle said bitterly. "This is exactly what Caldwell wanted, to destroy the Blue Bonnet so completely that we'd have no choice but to sell the claim." "We're not beaten yet," Tanner insisted. "Did you find investors in Durango?" "Yes, too, but they'll withdraw when they see this." "Maybe not." Tanner winced as he shifted position. "Help me up. We need to find Mitch." Despite Belle's protests, Tanner insisted on assessing the damage firsthand. The fire was finally being brought under control, though the headframe was destroyed and several buildings badly damaged. Miraculously, The tunnel entrances appeared largely intact, protected by their stone and concrete reinforcements. Mitch confirmed that all miners were accounted for, with only minor injuries reported. The sheriff had arrived belatedly, expressing unconvincing shock at the attack. "Caldwell's gone too far this time," Sheriff Brennan muttered. "Attacking a mine in broad daylight can't ignore that, no matter who's involved." "You've ignored plenty before," Tanner said coldly. "Why the sudden concern for justice?" The sheriff avoided his gaze. "Federal inspectors due in town. Looks bad if I don't at least make a show of investigating." Belle exchanged glances with Tanner. Caldwell must have learned of the inspector's imminent arrival. It would explain the urgency of his attempt to destroy the Blue Bonnet before federal authorities could examine it. As the night deepened, the firefighting efforts concluded. The mine yard was a scene of destruction: charred timber, collapsed structures, equipment warped by heat. The miners gathered in small groups, their expressions somber as they contemplated their uncertain future. Belle addressed them directly, standing tall despite her exhaustion and the mud staining her once neat traveling clothes. "I know you're worried about your jobs and your families. I want to assure you that the Blue Bonnet will rebuild. I've secured investors in Durango and will start repairs as soon as possible." A murmur of relief ran through the gathered men, though some looked skeptical. One veteran miner stepped forward. "With all due respect, Miss Emerson, we've heard promises before." "How do we know Caldwell won't just destroy everything again?" "Because this time he'll face consequences," Belle replied firmly. "Federal Mining Inspector Hammond arrives in 2 days to investigate not only this attack, but Caldwell's entire operation, including my father's death." The mention of Harold Emerson brought nods of approval. The miners had respected him, and many suspected foul play in his death. "In the meantime," Belle continued, "I need volunteers to secure what remains and begin clearing debris. Those who help will receive full wages, regardless of whether we're producing ore." Nearly every miner stepped forward, their loyalty to the Blue Bonnet and to Belle evident in their determination. Tanner, despite his injury, stood beside her, his presence lending weight to her promises. As the miners dispersed to begin the cleanup, Tanner finally allowed Belle to examine his wound properly. The bullet had grazed his shoulder, painful but not serious with proper cleaning and bandaging. "You should see the doctor," Belle insisted as she helped him to a seat on an overturned crate. "Later," Tanner replied, his gaze fixed on the destruction around them. "Belle, I need to tell you something. While fighting Caldwell's men, I overheard them talking. They mentioned tampering with support beams in your father's tunnel, said Caldwell had ordered it personally." Belle's hands stilled on his bandage. "You heard them admit it, clear as day. One man was nervous about doing the same to our western tunnel, said he didn't want another death on his conscience." Tanner met her eyes. "We have the evidence we need, Belle. Caldwell murdered your father." The revelation should have brought satisfaction, but Belle felt only a profound sadness. "All this destruction, my father's death for what? Greed, power," Tanner corrected gently. "Men like Caldwell crave control more than wealth. Your father challenged that control, and so did you." As dawn broke over the mountains, casting pale light on the devastation, Belle made a decision. "We're not just going to rebuild, Tanner. We're going to make the Blue Bonnet better than before, safer, more productive. My father wanted to create something that would last. We're going to fulfill that dream." The determination in her voice brought a smile to Tanner's weary face. Belle met his gaze steadily. "If you're willing to stay." "Wild horses couldn't drag me away," he replied softly. "Not from the Blue Bonnet and not from you." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Belle felt her heart quicken as Tanner reached for her hand, his calloused fingers entwining with hers. Despite the destruction surrounding them, despite the challenges ahead, she felt a sense of rightness, of coming home. The next days passed in a blur of activity. Belle divided her time between organizing repairs at the mine, meeting with potential suppliers in town, and preparing documentation for Inspector Hammond. Tanner, his shoulder bandaged but his spirit undiminished, worked alongside the miners to clear debris and salvage equipment. Word of the attack spread throughout the region, drawing unexpected support. miners from neighboring claims volunteered time and materials. The merchants of Silverton, many secretly resentful of Caldwell's monopolistic practices, extended credit to the Blue Bonnet. Even the hotel proprietor, previously cool toward Belle, offered reduced rates for miners displaced by the fire. When Inspector Hammond arrived, he was visibly shocked by the mine's condition. Belle and Tanner presented their evidence methodically, the eyewitness accounts of Caldwell's men admitting to tampering with Harold Emerson's tunnel, the pattern of intimidation and sabotage, and now the brazen attack on the Blue Bonnet. "This goes beyond mining disputes," Hammond said gravely after examining their documentation. "These are criminal actions, possibly extending to murder. I'll telegraph the U.S. Marshal's office immediately." Sheriff Brennan, present for the inspection, shifted uncomfortably. "Now, let's not be hasty. Mr. Caldwell is a respected businessman who employs thugs to burn down competing operations." Hammond interrupted. "Sheriff, I suggest you consider where your loyalties lie. The federal government takes a dim view of local law enforcement who enable such activities." The warning had its intended effect. By that evening, Sheriff Brennan had deputies searching for Caldwell, who had mysteriously disappeared from his usual haunts. Reports suggested he had fled toward the New Mexico territory, perhaps hoping to escape federal jurisdiction. 3 days later, as reconstruction of the Blue Bonnet's headframe began, a telegram arrived from Durango. U.S. Marshals had apprehended Caldwell attempting to board a train south. He would be brought back to Colorado to face charges of arson, attempted murder, and criminal sabotage of mining operations. The news spread rapidly through Silverton, bringing a sense of justice long overdue. That evening, the miners of the Blue Bonnet organized an impromptu celebration at the town hall. Belle found herself the center of attention, receiving congratulations and expressions of gratitude from people who had initially viewed her with suspicion. "Your father would be proud," Mary Cooper told her, squeezing her hand affectionately. "He always said you had more backbone than most men he knew." "I wish I'd known him better," Belle replied wistfully. "There was so much distance between us, not just in miles." "He kept every letter you ever wrote him," Mary revealed. "Read them so often the paper started wearing thin at the folds. He loved you fiercely, Belle." The revelation brought tears to Belle's eyes. "Thank you for telling me that." As the celebration continued around her, Belle stepped outside for a moment of quiet reflection. The night was clear, stars brilliant above the mountains that had become her home in ways she never expected. She heard the door open behind her and knew without turning that it was Tanner. "Too noisy in there for you?" he asked, coming to stand beside her. "Just needed a moment to breathe," she replied. "It's been an overwhelming few days." "In a good way, I hope," Belle nodded, smiling. "In a very good way. The investors confirmed their support this morning." With Caldwell gone and the Blue Bonnet's reputation for rich silver intact, they're eager to participate in the rebuilding. "And will you stay to oversee it?" Tanner asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Or return to Philadelphia once things are settled?" Belle turned to face him. "There's nothing for me in Philadelphia anymore, Tanner. My life is here now, the Blue Bonnet, Silverton." She hesitated, then added softly, "You." The simple declaration seemed to release something in Tanner. He stepped closer, his hands gently framing her face. "I've been waiting to hear those words since the day you stood up in that courthouse and fought for your father's legacy." "That long?" Belle asked, her heart racing. "That long," he confirmed. "I just never thought a refined Eastern lady would look twice at her rough mining foreman with dirt under his nails and not much to his name." "You have everything that matters," Belle said earnestly. "Courage, integrity, loyalty, those are worth more than all the silver in Colorado." Tanner's smile was tender as he leaned down, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that felt like coming home. Belle melted into his embrace, all the tension and fear of the past weeks dissolving in the warmth of his arms. The sound of the town hall door opening broke them apart. A group of miners emerged, their good-natured teasing bringing color to Belle's cheeks. "About time, boss," one called to Tanner. "We was taking bets on how long it'd take you to court the lady properly." Tanner laughed, keeping his arm around Belle's waist. "You all mind your own business," he called back without heat. As the miners wandered toward the saloon, still chuckling, Belle looked up at Tanner. "They approve, it seems." "The whole town approves," he replied. "You've earned their respect, Belle. Not many would have fought as hard as you did, or risked as much." They returned to the celebration hand in hand, their new relationship acknowledged with smiles and knowing glances. The future stretched before them, rebuilding the Blue Bonnet, bringing Caldwell to justice, perhaps even expanding their operations once the mine was producing again. But that was tomorrow's concern. Tonight was for celebration, for new beginnings, for the unexpected love that had blossomed amid conflict and danger. As they danced together in the crowded town hall, Belle realized she had found something far more precious than silver in the mountains of Colorado. She had found her place in the world, and the man with whom she wanted to share it. 1 year later, the rebuilt Blue Bonnet mine gleamed in the summer sunlight, its new headframe and buildings a testament to perseverance and vision. Production had resumed within 3 months of the fire, the western tunnel yielding steady ore while repairs to the eastern tunnel continued. Now, a year later, the Blue Bonnet was the most productive mine in the Silverton district, employing over 50 miners and supporting twice as many families. Belle stood on the porch of the expanded mine office, watching wagons haul the latest ore shipment toward town. Beside her, Tanner reviewed production reports, his brow furrowed in concentration. "The eastern tunnel's yielding better than expected," he observed, pleased. "That new drilling equipment was worth every penny." "Mitch said the same thing yesterday," Belle replied, smiling at her husband of 6 months. "He's talking about extending the tunnel another 50 feet before winter." Their wedding had been Silverton's social event of the year, the mine owner and her foreman, a love story that had captured the town's imagination. Judge Winters had performed the ceremony in the town hall, with Mary Cooper standing in for the mother Belle had lost and Mitch giving her away in her father's stead. The miners had formed an honor guard, cleaned up and solemn in their Sunday best, as Belle walked down the aisle in a gown ordered specially from Denver. They lived now in a comfortable house halfway between the mine and town, built on land that had once belonged to the Blue Bonnet claim. Belle had insisted on modern conveniences, indoor plumbing, a proper kitchen, glass windows that opened to mountain views. Tanner had added a stable for their horses and a workshop where he tinkered with mining equipment improvements. Victor Caldwell's trial had concluded 3 months earlier with a conviction on all charges. He would spend the next 15 years in the territorial prison, his empire dismantled, his properties sold to cover restitution to those he had harmed. The Blue Bonnet had received a substantial settlement, which Belle and Tanner had used to establish a fund for miners injured in accidents and for families who lost providers to the dangers of mining. "The mails arrived," Tanner said, pointing to a rider approaching from town. "Might be news from the Mining Association about your father's safety proposals." Belle had submitted Harold Emerson's tunnel reinforcement designs to the Colorado Mining Association, advocating for their adoption as industry standards. The initial response had been encouraging, with several larger operations already implementing the techniques. The rider delivered a packet of letters and newspapers, tipping his hat respectfully to both Belle and Tanner before continuing his rounds to other mines. Among the correspondence was a formal letter from the association, confirming that Emerson supports would indeed be recommended as the new safety standard for silver mining operations throughout Colorado. "He did it," Belle said softly, showing Tanner the letter. "My father's work will save lives across the territory. He'd be prouder of you than the invention," Tanner replied, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "You made this happen, Belle." She leaned into his embrace, savoring the moment of triumph. "We made it happen. Everything good in my life here has been a partnership with you, with the miners, with the town." As the afternoon sun began its descent toward the western peaks, they walked down from the mine office toward the workers' housing, where Mary Cooper was organizing a community dinner to celebrate the mine's anniversary. The small collection of cabins had grown into a proper settlement, with a schoolhouse for the miners' children and a company store that offered fair prices instead of the exploitative rates common in mining camps. The celebration was already underway when they arrived, long tables set up in the open area between cabins. Children played games under watchful eyes, miners and their wives chatted in groups, and music from a fiddle and banjo filled the air. A cheer went up as Belle and Tanner joined the gathering. Mitch Cooper approached, his weathered face split by a wide grin. "Just got the last assay reports from the northeastern drift," he announced. "Best silver content yet. We might have found another major vein." The news added to the festive atmosphere. As the evening progressed, Belle found herself surrounded by people who had become her family in this remote mountain community. They shared a meal of venison stew, fresh bread, and pies made from wild berries the children had gathered. When the tables were cleared and lanterns lit against the gathering dusk, someone called for a toast. Tanner stood, raising his glass. "To the Blue Bonnet," he began, "and to Harold Emerson, whose vision brought us all together." "To Belle," Mitch added, "who fought for her father's legacy when others would have surrendered." Mary Cooper rose next. "To partnerships in business and in life that make us stronger than we could ever be alone." The toasts continued, each more heartfelt than the last, until Belle found herself blinking back tears of happiness. When it was her turn to speak, she looked around at the faces illuminated by lantern light, finding friendship and respect where once there had been only suspicion. "When I arrived in Silverton a year ago," she said, her voice carrying across the now quiet gathering, "I thought I was simply settling my father's affairs before returning to what I considered civilization. I never expected to find a home here or a purpose or the love of my life." She smiled at Tanner, who returned her gaze with equal warmth. "The Blue Bonnet isn't just a mine, it's a community, a family, and I'm grateful every day to be part of it." Cheers erupted, followed by music and dancing that continued well into the night. As stars appeared above the mountains, Belle and Tanner slipped away from the celebration, walking hand in hand toward home. "Happy?" Tanner asked, though he knew the answer. "Completely," Belle replied, squeezing his hand. "I was thinking about something Mary said today about partnerships making us stronger. It's true in so many ways. The Blue Bonnet would never have survived without everyone working together. And we wouldn't be who we are without each other," Tanner added thoughtfully. "You've made me a better man, Belle Royce, and you've shown me what real courage looks like, Tanner Royce." She stopped walking, turning to face him in the starlight. "I have news." Something in her tone made Tanner study her face intently. "What kind of news?" Belle took his hand and placed it gently against her still flat stomach. "The kind that means we'll need to add a nursery to our house before winter." For a moment, Tanner stood frozen, comprehension dawning slowly. Then his face transformed with a joy so pure it took Belle's breath away. He lifted her in a gentle embrace, spinning them both beneath the star-filled sky. "A baby," he whispered when he finally set her down. "Our baby." "Due in February," Belle confirmed, her own happiness mirrored in his expression. "Are you pleased?" In answer, Tanner kissed her with tender passion, his hands cradling her face as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "Beyond pleased," he said when they parted, overjoyed, terrified, grateful all at once. They continued their walk home, making plans and sharing dreams for their child's future. The road ahead would have challenges. Raising a child in a mining town wouldn't be easy, and the Blue Bonnet would always require vigilance and hard work. But together, they had already overcome obstacles far greater than any they might face. As they reached their home, lights glowing welcomingly in the windows, Belle paused to look back at the silhouette of the Blue Bonnet mine against the night sky. Her father's legacy, now hers and Tanner's, and someday their child's, a testament to perseverance, courage, and the unexpected paths that lead to happiness. "We did it, Father," she whispered to the stars. "We made it something that will last." Tanner's arm encircled her shoulders, drawing her close against the mountain chill. "Come inside, love. It's getting cold and you're thinking for two now." Belle smiled, turning toward the warmth of their home and the promise of their future together. In coming to the wild mountains of Colorado, she had found not just silver, but gold of a far more precious kind, the love and community that had transformed her life in ways she never could have imagined. And for that, she would be forever grateful.